It's a cold, wet, rainy, windy day here in Metro Vancouver, and I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about just the Vancouver Canucks and their free agency opportunities before I get to my internship later today. So, we all know that Gustav Nyquist signed a $5.5 million deal with the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, that's pretty good. Gustav Nyquist, we know he's a legitimate NHL top 6 forward. He got 60 points last year, split between the Red Wings and the Sharks. He had 20 goals, something like that. He was a really good player, and we all kind of know that he's a really good player. And he signed a $5.5 million deal with Columbus. However, Rick Dhaliwal went on to Twitter earlier yesterday, and he was like, okay, they did it. They signed Nyquist. However, the Vancouver Canucks were also apparently very, very interested, and they were one of the main contenders for Nyquist as well, because Nyquist wanted to play with Pettersson. However, Rick Dhaliwal also said that the Canucks ran out of cap space, which is why they weren't able to get a deal done. So, when I read that tweet initially, I was thinking to myself, okay, what the heck? I thought we had a ton of cap space. What exactly is the issue here? Why do we have no cap space all of a sudden? So I checked up on the Cap Friendly. Turns out we do. We have $8.7 million in cap space, and that's just enough to barely get all the guys that we need to sign. Brock Boeser needs a contract. Josh Leivo needs a contract. Goldolbin, Tevez, Rafferty, and just taking away from all of those guys here. Let's not talk about Leivo and Goldolbin and all that. Let's just only talk about Boeser for now. Assume Boeser takes a $7 million contract, because, that's kind of in the ballpark of what everybody thinks he's going to get. If Boeser takes a $7 million contract, then all of a sudden that $8.7 million we have in cap space goes down to about 1.7. And I didn't realize that the Canucks were so close to the cap already, and we were so close to getting a guy like Gustav Nyquist, but we just missed out because we didn't have the space. And so how did this happen? Well, I was sitting about it, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, well, okay, let's actually take a look at this rationally here. I'm not going to fault Benning for any of the moves that were made in the past, 2 weeks. These are moves that are establishing us as a contender. These are moves that are establishing us as a team that wants to make the playoffs, and I love that. You have to make the playoffs eventually. You have to reward your fans eventually, and that's what we're doing. When we got ourselves JT Miller, we signed Tyler Myers. We're getting all these guys that will help push us into the playoffs, and I like that. But what I kind of don't like at the same time is this idea that we're okay with keeping the guys that we have previously and establishing them as core pieces. Sure, Edler getting $6 million is good. I like that because Edler's a good player, and it's only for 2 years, so that's great. I'm fine with that. However, we do have $4.3 million, something like that, invested into Brandon Sutter, and we have $6 million in Louis Eriksson, and we have $3 million in Roberto Luongo too. So the idea here that I'm trying to present is why, if a prospect of getting a guy like Gustav Nyquist was available, why did we not make a single trade in an effort to free up some cap space and potentially go after this player? Because if you want to take a look at it, you can say, oh, why do you want to trade Sutter? Well, people are always talking about how he's a foundational guy, he's a leader guy in the room and everything. Sure, okay, that's great. But the fact of the matter is, Sutter barely plays half the year. And when you compare that to other guys around the league who can make up to $4 million a season, Sutter is inferior to that. Sutter is not getting paid like a player who should be playing less than half the season. And that's just a fact. You can't be getting paid $4 million to sit out on half the year. And sure, I can understand that Sutter is a very good foundational player, but the fact of the matter is, what he brings to the Vancouver Canucks on the ice is lackluster in comparison to his contract. And I don't even need to talk about Eriksson. You guys know what I think about Eriksson. Everybody kind of has the same opinion on Eriksson. So the fact of the matter is here, the Vancouver Canucks had an opportunity to get Gustav Nyquist, who is a legitimate top 6 NHL forward who could get up towards of 60, maybe even 65 points in a year. And honestly, he could probably sign for less in Vancouver. He took a $5.5 million deal in Columbus. And that is interesting to me. Because if he wanted to come over to Vancouver to play with Pettersson, what exactly is it telling me when I think about it with Columbus? If he wanted to come to Vancouver to play with Pettersson, who did we want to play with the Blue Jackets? Who does he want to play with in the Blue Jackets? Alexander Wenberg? Alexandre Texier? Because I'm telling you, if the prospect of playing with PD is so valuable to these players, and we know it is, I think he probably came over to Vancouver and he could have asked for less and he could have gotten less. So that's just my little spiel on how I believe it's a little bit unfortunate how we could have gotten a legitimate top 6 forward like Gustav Nyquist, but we were held back because we didn't have the cap space. We have projected $8.7 million in cap, take off 7 for Boeser. That's about $1.7 million. So overall, it's just unfortunate to look at. And going forward into the future, I'm expecting Benning to make some moves. I'm expecting to get around the things like the Luongo cap penalty. I'm expecting that we get some of these contracts off so we can have the opportunity to get another top 6 forward, either in a trade or in free agency. So that's just my little spiel. I'm getting kind of tired walking around and talking around, so I'm gonna go over back onto the SkyTrain. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. Social 99, and bye.